Just when you thought academia couldn't get any dumber, this Yale law professor proposes giving 20-year-olds 2 votes, one for themselves and one for your kids. I started this channel with the interest of promoting a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom, and part of that is protecting my kids, which apparently this Yale law professor thinks he can do better than I can. If you would please like the video on the way in, I would love to further earn your support. Ross Douthat over at the New York Times interviewed a Yale law professor named Sam Moyne, and Sam believes that the interests of kids, my kids, should be represented, at least in the voting booth, by another 20-year-old instead of being weighted toward me, the parent of those 4 kids. And he says specifically it's because the interests of the parents diverge from the interests of their own children. Insanity.
How older Americans hoard the future. Now, we can talk about all sorts of possible solutions to the problem that the elderly have most of the wealth and most of the houses, and they also enjoy virtually all the political power, and thus they derive the lion's share of the government benefits, mostly in the form of having their health care paid for. But this idea, is not the answer.
I've gotten in some hot water for proposing we consider overweighting the votes of younger people, or assigning the youngest eligible voters proxy votes for the unrepresented children of our country. So those are edgy.
Why not assign them to those children's parents?
Well, because there's a divergence of interest between parents and children.
Ross Douthat then pushes back and calls the man daft and says that is absurd. And Ross says he believes he has the best interest of his kids in mind more than the Marxist, tyrannical state ever could. And this is just another indicator that the state and these law professors, the people who are driving the bus towards Marxism, have the desire to raise your kids because they cannot simply have any kids of their own. And just recently, AOC has come out and said that she is storing some of her eggs for future use, and it is just another indication that they are unable to have the kids that they want or desire to control. And it's not that they want kids, they want to control kids so they can control the future and point it towards their tyrannical ends.
Douthat raised an obvious objection to that, asking why we wouldn't simply give the kids votes to their own parents rather than to some random 19-year-old. Professor Moyne countered that he doesn't think parents represent the interests of their own kids as well as this random teenager would. Here's how Douthat responds.
I think it's absurd to imagine that a 24-year-old recent college graduate has a better assessment of the interests of my own children than I do. I say this with all due respect to 24-year-old recent college graduates.
At the top, at the boomer generation, there is just a glut of the wealth, power, and influence, and actually the benefits that are going toward the majority of our debt as a country, which is like Medicaid, Social Security, and a lot of that has been given to the generation which is aging out right now. And that was the debate, and this gentleman, Sam Moyne, proposes that they weight the votes of children, or basically people who just became adults, in some type of fashion so that they have more influence. And the sad part is that this is just a product of our inability to have children, because had there just been an appropriate amount of kids coming out of my generation, the millennials or Gen X, this would not be a problem. And frankly, there aren't enough workers at the bottom. There aren't enough workers in these younger generations to generate the type of revenue necessary to uplift our entitlement system right now. And had we just had the appropriate amount of 2.1 kids per wife, then we would not be in this circumstance. But because we find ourselves here, they try to flood immigration as well as somehow weight the votes of the younger generations so that they can vote their way out of all of the benefits going to the older gen.
Has grown very, very old.
Questions about Senator Mitch McConnell's health are only growing.
Senator Lindsey Graham from the state of South Carolina has died.
With images of his bruised hands covered in makeup going viral, President Trump is now defending his health.
And the rising generation seems to feel like their elders are hoarding the American dream.
boomers ruined the economy for us.
College is unaffordable, healthcare is unaffordable, gas is unaffordable, utilities is unaffordable.
They inherited the greatest economy for the working class in quite possibly the entirety of human history, and they it up in a few decades.
The boomers are being accused of hoarding the American dream, and as we see people like Mitch McConnell, RBG up at the top generation, Trump himself being the ones who hold power and influence, this is a reasonable claim. And having listened to the Jay Burden show over the last week, there is an angst in the younger generations as they continually see that they do not have the capacity to generate the same type of opportunities based on their dollar, based on the jobs that are being offered. And frankly, if you're a young white man, especially if you're straight and Christian, those opportunities are ever fleeting. And I know, as a therapist and somebody who's worked in substance abuse recovery for a long time, I got in right before the door closed behind me. And it is extremely sad that even one of these sort of soft science, social industries like the one that I work in, even the door there is often closed. Even if you want to do things that the Marxists would say are so good for society, you want to, be a social influencer down at the social work end of things, even those doors are being closed to the younger generations, and especially to certain cohesive units like young white men. The door is completely shut, and they will not tolerate that door being closed for much longer. And as evidenced by the ways that they are just building in a desire to remake the system, as Jay Burden has said in his show last week.
This is the counter argument to your book. The argument is young people aren't accustomed to the idea that they will have to sacrifice. They are entitled. And because they are entitled, they have encountered hardship and decided out of nowhere to burn the system to the ground. Talking to Rod Dreher, he said that these young men, he uses the term groypers, which functionally means absolutely nothing, to say these people don't want anything. They're a threat to our democracy. They just want to burn it down. In your book, you present that, shall we say, discontent with establishment American politics in a very different way.
We must account for some way that young men can receive the same opportunities or something approximating the same amount of, spending power, of benefit to their labor. We must account for this. We must make something happen here. And the boomers, I don't frankly blame them entirely, because they did what they protected their interests, and now that the interests of the younger generation appear to be deferred, there is a rise among the youth, and that's part of the reason that socialism has become popular, something that's a little bit warmer to the younger generations, because they see, frankly, their opportunities going by the wayside. And until we can do something about that, we will continue to see this generational fight, this intergenerational warfare, and one way or the other, this problem will be gone in 20 years. And the question is, what kind of government and society will take its place? And if you would like to continue to push for a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom for your children, and not allow the state, nor the New York Times, nor the Yale law professors speak for your kids, I would love your support in building that community. Thank you so much for watching.